First of all, I just want to thank all of you. This is a terrific thing you're doing. Can you hear me okay? Is that? We can make it. All right. Before I start with the thing I came here just to talk about, I just had a few responses to some of the things. I've been here for the last 4 or 5 presenters. I'm reminded a little bit of a story that is told that somebody was talking to Einstein once and said, for an astronomer, a man is but the tiniest speck in a vast universe. And Einstein said, yes, but that speck is the astronomer. It is true that we are all pieces of data. We are all quanta. We are all little specks that show up in cabs or whatever else. But we are also strange kind of anchorings that don't get muddled on those things. It is true that that we could do a map of all the routes that took us to this place today through time, and it would have a certain kind of fascination. It would be absolutely fascinating, actually. But it wouldn't capture the strange fact that there was doubtless somebody in this room that just found out they were pregnant. Or somebody else who's about to be evicted, or somebody who is can't get over the fact that somebody committed suicide they knew a few weeks ago. So it's an interesting kind of complication that sets in. I would recommend that any of you who are doing the kind of work that everybody seems to be doing here takes a look at Ian Fraser's remarkable book, Family. Sandy Fraser is one of the great, to my mind, the greatest writer of my generation. A terrific writer. It's done all kinds of good stuff. But this book, Family, which is not in its entirety successful, has one particular chapter which is just a knockout, where he's basically tracing the history of his own family from back in the 1600s to the present, and how they ended up in Hudson, Ohio. And at one point, and it's a chapter, I think the chapter's called Hudson, he does an analysis of the forces of suburbanization that created Hudson after World War II. The first half of it is a sociological survey of all the things that happened. It's all true. It's one way of talking about Hudson. It would have been similar to some of the ways that were happening here. But there were these particular forces after World War II, and after Rosie the Riveter, and after having to set up dead women back into the household, and there were all these fascinating things. They're all true. And he does a very nice, elegant sociological analysis of how the town of his youth took shape and so forth. And then he switches gears suddenly. He talks about what it's like to drive back to Hudson from New York City. And then he checks into a motel and he waits for the traffic jams to sort themselves out. And then in the evening he starts driving around. And he thinks. He says, and he's obviously talking about the real life lived in that house. She was the prettiest girl in the graduating class. In 1967, she committed suicide. He was the quarterback, blah, blah, blah. He went to Vietnam, came back, and became a homeless man. She had a horsey laugh, and she married a man who looked like a horse. And it goes through all, and suddenly it becomes kind of like Fort Wild in our town. It's entirely, and they are two ways of telling the same story. They're absolutely equal, but one of them gets lost about it in some of the kind of stuff that happens here. And so I think it's important to try and talk not only about quantum, but quality. I suppose is one way of saying that. Okay, having said that, I will tell you that my own career as a writer began with a long profile, a book-length profile of the artist Robert Irwin, which was called "Seeing is Forgetting the Name of a Thing One Sees." It was about all the things he had to forget before he could see. Eventually down to the name. I mean, to the point that if you really want to see this, really look at it, in its particularity, you get to the point where you don't even remember what it is or what it's for. His entire practice has been to try and get people to stop free associating, but to attend to the thing that is right in front of them. I say that because that was the first book. In some ways, it was the last time I was able to save myself from myself, or my last attempt, because everything else I've done has been going exactly the other way. Has been reveling in how things relate to each other, how things remind people of other things, and so forth. So I wrote this book called Everything That Rises, a book of convergences, which was a kind of glory of those sorts of things. It'll be coming out in paperback in a few weeks, and you can take a look at it. But it owed a lot to a moment where John Berger, the great master, critic, artist, novelist, shortly after Che Guevara was killed, and that photograph of him on the plinth, surrounded by all the generals, appeared in newspapers all over the world, on the front page of every newspaper in the world. And a few weeks later, he wrote a piece that said, we all know what this photograph is based on. The image hot-wired, as it were, in the minds of the generals that taught them where to stand and taught the photographer where to stand to place his camera when he took the picture. This is based on Rembrandt's anatomy lesson. What's interesting about that is you can take it further and think about the way that Rembrandt's anatomy lesson is based on a whole series of images of Christ from the Renaissance, the deposition of Christ and laid out, and has as its subtext that he will be resurrected. It is absolutely essential to the image of Che looking like, it is absolutely essential to the cult of Che that he had a beard at the moment that he was killed. That picture was about that, and through that picture going back through Rembrandt and back through other things, it led to the whole notion that he would indeed be resurrected. And all I ask you to do as a mind experiment is think about what would happen to that picture if he hadn't been bearded. If I were doing this lecture, a different version of it, I have a photograph of him not bearded. He looks exactly like Desi Arnaz. And it wouldn't have worked. So I'm interested in the way that pictures prepare the way for other pictures, and things prepare the way for being seen by other things, and so forth. But anyway, Berger in effect gave me permission to do that in some kind of sense. I remember the day I read that article of his, I said, God, this guy used the newspaper too, but I read the newspaper, and this is initially the way we read the newspaper. But anyway, so I did my book, and then we agreed that we would start a contest for people, which you can go to, and I urge you not only go to it, to participate in it. We're now on our 40th week. Then the easiest way to get there, you just go to Convergence contest on Google, as you can see up there. And if you enter there, you end up here, and it's actually the fastest way is to go there. And you get to the Convergence of Convergences, and I'll just show you. And then, as you can see, there's been like 40 of them. It's kind of like batting practice for me. People send me these, and I have to judge, which I think is the most interesting that week, and then I respond to it with some comments. Just to give you some examples, this was a good one. Somebody had sent in this photograph from, can you see it up there? That photograph from Iraq of a Marine carrying a group of prisoners, and they said it reminded them very much of this by John Singer Sargent from 1918. The blinded of gassed and blinded from a battle. And my response was to say that indeed they are both based on this, which is Bruegel's The Blind Leading the Blind, and it's one of the things that you subliminally experience when you look at that first picture. But then if you want to see a really weird World War I Iraq convergence, take a look at this. The iconic image, of course you know, that is the monument to the missing of the Somme, Battle of the Somme. Weird. Anyway, and just to show you something that are just kind of fun and silly. This one left me speechless. I don't know if say this. Somebody talked about that iconic image from Goya of sadly eating his own children. Thank God, otherwise just pay attention to that.